Hello. When we talk about having respect for others, we may have heard the phrase of being able to walk in someone else's shoes or understand how they see the world. To me, this also means trying to understand why people can't change if they should change. And we should change. We should grow, shouldn't we? Why is it then that Freud said so many of us are fixated? Now, some have put a lot of Freud's theories into question, but I like this concept of fixation and his concept of defense mechanisms as to how we handle fear or anxiety, as it's sometimes called. And to me, this has taken an awful lot of work, but I think I'd like to bring forth the idea that one of the hardest things to understand about people and thus have respect about is understanding someone who has a different set of ways of coping with anxiety than we were raised to use, either in our family or our culture or both. And I believe that when we talk about defenses, we can talk about two types. First, denials, where a person outright says something just can't be. And second is a subtler form, maybe not quite as powerful, wherein we say we manage anxiety through things such as distractions or isolation. And I know in psychoanalytic theory there's talk of more mature defense mechanisms and less mature ones, and the psychotic ones being denial-based. So I think there's real substance for this, and in fact I read an entire book by Charles Bruner about 5 years ago on the theory of psychoanalysis, and this is what was pointed out. So I know there's substance for this, and this is where I get some of my ideas. But then there's the rub. How are we to understand someone else who uses defense mechanisms that are quite different than ours, especially if we're not using ones that are quite, shall we say, heavy in potency, these denial-based ones that psychoanalysts used to talk of way back. These, by Charles Bruner, are alternatively called the primitive defenses. And again, there are being more mature ones. I might add that Charles Bruner and some others have said even that humor is a defense mechanism too, but more mature, more optimal perhaps. And my personal thought in the last year is that everybody has to have some defense mechanisms, and that this isn't a, quote, flaw in us, it's a reality based on our physiology, wherein we have several problems such as knowing we're going to die someday and having trouble remembering things. Our memory is like a sieve. And we also only have so many hours in the day and so many days allotted to us for learning and growing in general. And when we die, it's hard to pass it on, lock, stock, and barrel. We also have an amygdala that reacts quite strongly to threats to us, especially to our physiology and self-esteem. And so right there, too, is a reason why it is said it's probably impossible to get rid of all defense mechanisms, and the best we should hope for, naturally, is to have optimal ones for us, given our physiology once again. We have built-in limitations by our physiology. So the task again for being respectful is in part, I think, part and parcel understanding other people's set of defense mechanisms, for lack of a better word. Some would say coping mechanisms. Others might say your drug of choice. And I don't just mean then chemical-based ones, but There's a woman, Anne Schaaf, Dr. Anne Schaaf, who wrote various books, and she passed away a year ago. And she said in her book, When Society Becomes an Addict, that she considers there to be two types of addictions. The ones that I call the chemical-based ones, and I'm trying to remember the word she used, substance-based perhaps. And then there's the process addictions, she called it. And I call them anything other than a drug, such as a denial or something you use to distract yourself other than drugs. And that can even also include isolating yourself. So these can all then be called addictions of a sort. And the task then to be respectful is to understand each person's addictive system, usually not just one addiction, i.e. chronic use of a defense mechanism, but a packaged deal of them, as taught by your parents and society in general, even to boil down to what part of the country you live in and which country and which era of humanity, which is all easier said than done by far. And here's what I think also really separates the men from the boys, so to speak, is not just identifying who is coping in life in which way, call it defense mechanisms or drugs of choice, but why they persist in using them, whether it's alcohol, meth, who knows. Why they can't break free of that. Maybe we then need to take a look at cultural, what they call memes, M-E-M-E-S, or what's put out in the marketplace so often on the media, Hollywood, and in our institutions, as to the best ways they claim to cope, each with its own variety of package deals, I might add. And these tend to persist, such that it's rather like if you get bed bugs, or fleas, or louse, and you get deloused or de-bedbugged, so to speak, by a doctor's aid or otherwise, then you're urged to take your linens and any other environmental factors and have them dry cleaned or washed, even to include spraying your sofas and such, the fabrics. Why? So you don't get reinfected. And if you come out of a rehab facility, you're expected to change your set of friends, maybe even move away. Why? So you don't get reinfected. And let's say you change your religion to one you consider more evolved, or you adopt religion. Then you're going to want to change what TV programming you watch. Well, can you imagine then if you simply change your mind on some things, but you don't change your environmental factors? Well, then it's going to be very hard going. I know one psychotherapist or analyst, in fact, in the past, 30 years ago, who required of his clients that they read no books on psychology and just listen to him. Why? In his opinion, I think, so they don't get infected by ideas that are going to be counterproductive. And in my essence then, or view, that's why Freud talked of fixations. It's not just fixations on what he claimed was psychosexual stages, which I really question, but fixations in the sense that no matter what kind of so-called cognitive therapy or reform of your stinking thinking, as AA puts it, you do, you're still going to be fixated if you go right back into the environment that was causing so much misinformation in the first place, as to defense mechanisms being so great to use that might not have been. As an example then, if a person is trying to evolve and be more compassionate and more honest, and yet they keep turning on violent TV programs from Hollywood or other sources, then you're getting reinfected all the time and you're fixated, so to speak, no matter what kind of thinking you do on your own or who you see for assistance. what journaling you do, etc., and what church you go to or not, if you still get reinfected all the time from certain sources who say violence is the best way to cope with reality, or sexaholism, or throwing a lot of money at your problems, isn't that called fixation? And it's thus our task not just to understand other people's ways of coping, how they were brought up, but what perpetuates it, so that we don't say, quote, disrespectfully, why can't you change, you son of a gun? Why are you so lazy and why won't you change? And then that being a big part of the essence of non-respect, to not understand what perpetuates and keeps them from growing in general. What keeps them fixated? If we could understand that better or maximally, isn't that part of respect? And maybe I'll leave it at that for today. That's very difficult, but it has been done by some fewer number of people. And to the extent it has, I think these people are called the most respectful. And I'll leave with one last thought. In one movie I saw with Robert Redford and Morgan Freeman, was it The Undiscovered Country? At one point, he said to his daughter, who had come to visit, I expect, or rather granddaughter, I expect you to treat everyone with respect who comes to my house. And so perhaps that's why that concept has some validity, I think. For who does not want it to be understood as to why not only they do certain things to cope, but why they, moreover, can't seem to break free of that.